You got your master's in creative writing while you were there at Portland. Were you thinking eventually you might also be writing? Are you still planning to also do some writing?
So that's a great question. And I've been avoiding answering that for years.
I'll see what I asked.
So thank you. Um, I I do think there was a moment in my 20s, or probably several moments in my 20s while I was like in undergrad and graduate school, where I probably did think, oh, well, maybe, you'll just write books. But I can't say I've always written, but I've always written more like poetry. Like when I was in high school, that's what I wrote poetry all the time. I had a lot of feelings. And I wanted to get them out. I wasn't really like a prose writer. And then being an undergrad and graduate school, you do take a lot of those creative writing courses. I took like short story classes. And so I tried my hand at prose. So I won't lie and say I haven't thought of it or I haven't experimented. I even think for a while in grad school, I had written several, like probably like 20, 30,000 words of like something before being like, this is awful. And like throwing it, I would always like hit a wall, which I know is actually pretty common having worked with authors, now as my day job, that like you do hit a wall at that like 30, 40K mark often in a manuscript, even if you're like very good at what you do. But yeah, honestly, like, I think it was just something I needed to get out of my system. And I think when you tell people I want to work with books, or they just assume you want to be a writer. Like I remember telling my dad and like my mom and like family members, like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. Like, this is what I want to be. And them always being like, so you're going to write a book one day, right? And like being like, no, like this isn't my backup plan. This is my plan. like, like I'm not doing this so that I can be like, surprise, here's a book. So yeah, now, having worked as an agent for several years, having worked in this industry for several years, I don't have any ambitions of being a writer. That was a very long way to answer your question. Um, I could see myself, I think for me, like poetry was always more of like a cathartic thing. I published a few poems in grad school and college for like college, publications, but it's just not something that I ever see myself like seriously pursuing. It was always something that was more for my own soul and like emotions versus like a need to publish, if that makes sense. And after doing a lot of soul searching, like I know that about myself. um, and honestly, right now I have I get a lot more fulfillment helping authors with their stories than I ever did writing or trying to write my own. So yeah.
I think it's perfectly valid use of your time to write poems just because it's fun to write poems.
Yeah.
It's nourishing to write poetry. Go for it. Write a novel that nobody ever reads but you, if you so desire.
Yeah. It was always more like my process of like processing emotions, like just observations. Like I really love that about poems. And I still really I don't represent poets, but I really enjoy poetry. And I often find that like I see that type of lyricism in some of my authors' books. And maybe that's why I'm drawn to them on some level. I have a big appreciation for craft and have studied it, of course, in college. But yeah, I no ambitions to leave the agenting gig to become an author.
So far as you know, I mean, so far as what anybody knows, anytime we start talking about future plans, I just remember, what were you thinking in 2019, 2020 was going to look like? Anyway, but do you
It's so true. It's so true, though.
In the future, do you plan to be agenting? What does a career trajectory look like for you ideally?
Yeah, no, I was just talking to a new client actually, and I was like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, no, I was one of those people that other people probably get really frustrated by, because I knew that I like wanted to work in this industry even when I was in high school. Like I say that in a not in a mean way, in a nice way. Cause I had a lot of friends who like didn't have any idea what they wanted to do when we were in college together. And I was always like, no, I want to work on books, but I had no idea what that meant. Like, okay, but like, what's the actual job? Like, you're just working with books. Like, what are you doing every day? Like, I hadn't thought that far. But I knew I wanted to work with books. And so no, I'm so grateful to be here. I feel so privileged to even be an agent, and like just grateful to have like landed this position. And yeah, I'm not going anywhere.